Thank you for choosing In My Shoes. I'm Hilda Kathy Broady, your host. First, viewer suggestions. We have to recognize viewer suggestions. Someone emailed me and said for me to start the show by saying to you, please get a pen and paper because you're not going to have time to go in while we're talking. So get ready now because we have a wonderful show and we're going to give a lot of information and we'd like for you to actually record it. I will put the information in the credits, but sometimes they go by pretty fast as well. Please know that we are broadcast all over the world at www.bronxnet.org. We're also on YouTube and Facebook. I'd like to give a shout out to some avid viewers that we have at Johns Hopkins Medical Center. Thank you for showing In My Shoes some love. Also, I need to take the time to thank the production staff at BronxNet for their outstanding dedication and helping to keep this show operational. It's a reality now, and it was my dream for a long time. I have some friends that just begged me to say. First, my college roommate, Teresa Sanders Davis, and her husband, James, have been married for 28 years. We talk about people in our community not staying together. Well, these folks have managed to not kill each other in 28 years, and they still love each other. They hugging and kissing and holding hands and stuff, so that's kind of cool. And I had a college cut buddy also. Her name was Sharon Smith, and Sharon Moses, and she married Charles Smith. And guess what? They've been married 29 years. So something about maybe Fordham graduates, I don't know. I'm not going to blame, I shouldn't say blame. Give Fordham the credit, but hey, we met, we married, we stayed together, and they're very happy people. So congratulations to the two couples, and if you have someone who had some longevity in the matrimonial situation, send me an email, queenpin53@yahoo.com, and I'll give you a shout out as well. Okay, as you remember, we have been doing one special episode every month called In My Shoes 2, where I have a co-host, Joseph Smith, also known as Bones X, and we're only going to be dealing with reentry, incarceration, and the issues and concerns that these people are experiencing. Not only the people who were incarcerated, but everyone that seems to be connected with them are also affected in a not positive way. So, without further ado, Joe, let's get busy.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Hilda. I'm looking forward to this program, this episode, In My Shoes 2. We had Eric Jenkins. He was re-entering society after, I think, 21 and a half years, 9 months, 3 days, something like that, of incarceration in the prison system. And I am pleased to say that he is not with us today because he is working. It's bittersweet, Hilda. I'm happy for him. I'm happy that he's out working. That's very important. However, I wanted to do the follow-up and have some of his family members come along to further expound on what we talked about last time, which is when an individual is incarcerated, the impact on the entire family and community. Now, we have agreed as a society that when someone is incarcerated, the whole family is incarcerated, whether it be the presence of that person missing from the family or the financial impact on the family trying to support and visit the inmate. But I think what people have not realized is that when that person is released from prison and in what we call a state of reentry, that the whole family also is in reentry. And what Eric described last time, and he's not alone, just that he was on the program, was the period of maladjustment, reintegrating with the family. And it can be extremely painful for the individual as well as the family. And if not guided correctly, can have some grave consequences. For instance, recidivism. Now, I mentioned to you a little earlier that I have not heard that the maladjustment period of reentry, I have not heard that named as a possible cause for the higher rates of recidivism. But in the case of Eric and others, when you don't fit in at home, particularly if you're returning in a leadership role, meaning that you are daddy and husband, and you've been gone for 20-something years and now you're back home, in leadership, at least in name, but you don't feel like it in deed, it causes conflict. And I've heard people say, well, I'd rather go back. I'd rather go back upstate. I'd rather go back to prison.
Yeah, because I remember Eric saying something about somebody's foot on his neck.
Yeah. That his wife. Oh. Sorry.
Oh, because I asked foot on his neck.
As a matter of fact, and I can talk about this because I spent countless hours on the phone with Eric, many nights, trying to walk him through this adjustment period. And that foot on his neck, that was his wife. And he went on to say that he left from one prison warden to come to another. Once again, it was his wife. And I'm trying to explain to Eric that, she held it down for 20-something years, raised the baby and held the house together. So she's accustomed to being the head honcho. I'm Big Mama, I'm Mommy. And whatever I say in this family goes. So when Daddy comes home, literally overnight, yes, it takes some adjustment. And it was not, I'm happy that they're working through it, but it was not a smooth transition. We have the time now to expound a little more on what I meant when I said last time that after seeing Eric's case firsthand, that I have since stopped telling people that when you're coming home from prison, if you got family, that's great, go to your family. And I am saying that I think there needs to be some type of transition, housing transition, even if your loved one will receive you with open arms, it may not be the best thing for you or them. Some type of structured program, outplacement where you leave prison and you go to a program and you are allowed visits with the family. You work your way back in. When these people left for prison, it was abrupt, literally snatched overnight, or in some cases, in a twinkling of an eye. So when they reappear, unfortunately, that same type of instantaneous process doesn't work so well. So a structured program, maybe 3 months, 6 months, depending on the individual and the environment that they're entering into, a structured program where they have visits, say day visits at first, and eventually work up to an overnight, then a weekend, and in time, the goal is to live in full time with your family. But then it's just not that overnight, here, daddy's home or mommy's home, and the chaos that comes with it. So I think that's a major breakthrough. In doing these programs, in my shoes too, even the struggle continues, and just StrugCon, working with people, we like to think, we want our clients to think. So as we go case by case, we're always trying to find new ways or improve ways, or looking for things that others may have overlooked in an outright attempt to make things better for everyone. So I really commend Eric again for coming on and being brave. And I wasn't that easy on him. And I could have, but I was not trying to set him up either. And I was careful in my dialogue. It took a lot of energy for him to come, and I didn't want to make him feel like I was picking on him. But his case is very interesting, but far from unique. And I just wonder, these higher rates of recidivism, how many brothers or sisters are actually going back because I don't fit in at home? Something else that came to my mind post the last program, I'm thinking that many people that are incarcerated have become institutionalized. Now, slightly on a different note, but years ago I was working with the foster care system, and I actually had a foster son. And I did the best I could for him. He was not a baby, he was like 11 or 12, a young man. And I really tried to do right by him, and he could never understand why I cared. No matter what I told him, he couldn't comprehend. even at 11 or 12, he'd seen more of life than I had, and not the positive things. So he often wondered, well, what's in it for you? And he knew it wasn't money, because I mean, we spent most of our time together, and city agencies fail most times, and this one was no exception. So I digged in my pocket for him, so he knew it wasn't financial, and he never could understand why I cared. And near the end of our time together, he told me, he says, I'd rather live in an institution.
Really?
Yeah, really. And I sat back, not unlike I'm doing now, and I says, okay, I'll help you get what you want. He says, I'd rather live in an institution.
Where?
He spent most of his life in institutions. I guess from a young boy, where things were structured and there wasn't that sense of family or someone that actually cares. People that were around him were there because it was their job.
And I think he was more afraid that if he started caring about you and you disappeared, then it would just be one more loss. So why do I even involve myself in that whole situation? Which is a lot of, because I did foster care too, but I didn't have one. I was a social worker.
Yeah.
So
And my hats, once again, my hats off to social workers, because I know that they're overworked, and it's just impossible to really give the care that you probably want to give to each case. But I'm mentioning this young man. I understand our topic, but just to introduce this term I'm talking about, calling institutionalized. And here he is 11, 12 years old, and he was more comfortable in an institution. So I promised him, I said, I'll give you my word. I said, whatever you want, I'll help you get what you want. I want you to be happy. And if that's gonna make you happy, then I'll help you get to your institution. I can't understand it, but our experiences are different. And saying that to say about reentry and people who have been incarcerated 20, 30, 40 years, they must have become institutionalized. And with that institutionalization, I'm saying that they lack the ability to mentally integrate and disintegrate. I'll take a second to talk about that. Just say Bones, Joe, Joseph, whomever. We all play different roles in life. You know, to my mother, I'm a son. To my siblings, I'm a brother. I'm an uncle. To my children, I'm a father. In the workplace, maybe I'm the supervisor, the manager, I'm boss. Maybe at church, I'm the pastor. We have different roles. And even though there's a common core element of me, I am different in each role. Meaning I should not be, if I'm a manager at work or a drill instructor in the Army, for instance. And if I went home to my children and treated them like I'm still a drill instructor, that's not a smooth transition.
they call it code switching.
Code switching. That's already a term, so, well, Bones, but still, you understand what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. And we have that ability to switch in different situations. And not to be confused with, I'm not talking about dissociative identity disorder, multiple personality, that's not what I'm talking about, but just different personas.
How you act.
Interact.
Because it's like when we were kids and you were outside playing with your friends,
right,
you spoke in one way.
Right.
When you went in the house,
right,
you knew better
right,
than that's not something that you did.
But you were still you in the
exactly,
process.
Exactly.
So when it comes to incarceration, especially longer periods of incarceration, I'm wondering now if many of our people are not suffering from, if you will, prison industrial complex psychosis, meaning they're stuck in institutional mode and they cannot get out. And I've heard stories, not only from Eric, but from other families, where it's something as simple as someone taking a shower and wearing the shower shoes, excuse me, as if you're in the prison shower. Just the little things that family members notice and says, you know, I wish they could turn it off. So this prison industrial complex psychosis, where you're stuck in a certain mode and you find it difficult, if not impossible, to code switch or to realize that, you know, this person is my husband or my wife and not the correction officer. Things that we take for granted, but to look inside the mind of people returning, and when you start seeing the similarities, case by case, there must be something to it. So this code switching, integration, disintegration process in the mind that seems to have been affected. And once again, you're talking 20, 30 years of institutional living. I just wish that going forward, well, I know we will, but I hope that others who work in this industry will hear and at least look into it.
Plan for reintegration.
Okay.
Really plan for it. Even if we did a step-by-step, a how-to, because it is how-to, because in prison you're a non-person, you're a number, and you need to do what you have to do in order to survive, and that's that. And we need to do what we have to do out here as well, but there's a little more freedom, there's a little more leeway. There's a little more leeway, and with our family, people are coming home and expecting a whole lot more leeway. I think that's part of the problem too, is I'm freed now, and I'm gonna do what I want when I want because I am free. And there has to be a step-by-step, because in my mind, you may have just come home, but you ain't been here, and maybe we need to work out a game plan, but prior to release.
Right.
The game, because it's, I want him home, and I've heard women say, I want him home, and then when he got there, she wanted to punch him out.
Yeah.
So that I want him home, but how long do you want him home? So maybe a day at a time, and then overnight, so that I can adjust my lifestyle, because it's not only the person coming home, the people in the household have to adjust to having basically a stranger, somebody who I knew, and if you're saying 20, 30, back in the olden days.
It's different.
And I don't know who you are now. You look similar, maybe, a little, but I don't know who you are. And I don't know what they did to you up there, and I don't know what you're bringing back here. And these are things that I've heard from the people that I've been working with. And it's almost hostility, but they don't mean for it to be hostile. How do you? I know that they don't mean for it to be hostile, because they're looking at me and saying, help me, help me, help me. So it's not hostile, but they're angry because everything didn't come together as it was planned in their mind for the years that they were gone.
I think you hit on a valid point. And I'm thinking back to the second episode of In My Shoes, not In My Shoes 2. Stacy. And I learned so much from Stacy, and she mentioned, we talked about the mental age. And it was Stacy that said, I think she was incarcerated when she was about 20 years old or so.
She was in for 23 years.
And she was in for 23 years. So when she was released at the age of 43, her mental age
was still 20.
Was still 20 years old. So if someone went away, you had a sweetheart, husband, wife, whatever it were, and you were married, and you got locked up for whatever reason, gone 20, 30 years, and when you come back, your spouse is 20 or 30 years older. They've changed with life experiences.
Exactly.
And you're the kid, 18, 19, 20-year-old kid coming back.
And you don't know what's been going on out here. You haven't been exposed to the real world. It's the institution, and the institution is regimented. And they don't really add a lot. I think that they're trying now to add more of the modern world into the institutions, because they're realizing that if they don't, they will be overcrowded more quickly than they want to be. And I'm not saying that they don't want the people there. There's a process.
Yes.
And they're not getting into the people were coming back too fast, I think. And they weren't really ready, because they had a whole slew of new people coming in, and you got the old people coming in. Now we have overcrowding, and then you will lose our funding. Because, the federal government says you can't be overcrowded, because we want you to keep a certain amount of people in there. And now you got these people coming back. When you let them go, we got the new ones coming. So that's problematic for the system as well. Yes. And I'm not saying that it's a bad problem. I think that it's almost a miracle that they recognize that perhaps maybe recidivism needs to be curtailed. I'm hearing it. Every time I go to Bedford Hills or to Taconic, I'm hearing we don't want them to come back. I have emails from people saying we want help. So somebody, and I don't know, it may not be the higher ups, the people that I'm meeting with.
Right.
Are, what do we call them? The ground level? The bottom of the rung people.
Right.
They're just above the prisoners, really. And
Right.
they're saying we need some help because they have no skills and they have no education, and they're going home and they have no interpersonal skills either.
I think that level of workers that you're talking about, they may have the most interaction with
Exactly.
the prisoners. So I think they have the ability to see the human side of the inmates because they actually interact with them. They're not the brass or the higher ups who see it all as statistics and numbers and dollars and cents. So perhaps that's why they're crying out for the extra help, because they actually see the human side of these people.
And I mean, I've actually had workers up there. We don't want to see her back. And I'm going, really? That's not really what I heard about her in these places. I thought you wanted to keep them forever and ever. And she's going, no. My mission is for them to provide them with the tools that they need so that they don't come back. And she's actually doing the groundwork months before they're even released.
Wow.
So I'm saying, ooh, maybe I should really feel hopeful here, or is it pie in the sky, or is this window dressing? Why do we have such distrust? Because right away I was ready to say, what's in it for her? and WIIFM is like my favorite song. But it really was that she really, when she heard about Katrina, she was more upset than Katrina. Asking that she didn't want it. She said, I don't want to see that woman back here. Please do what you can to keep her out of here.
I think it's wonderful that we have this opportunity to talk today. We are accustomed to having a guest in the studio, but I think it's good that we can kind of
Go over some things
and just step back, reevaluate. And also, I think that a lot of the things we are talking about now is actually an outline to probe deeper into things in the future. When it comes to incarceration, I like to look at or think about the varied causes. Now, when we see people in prison, that's the end result. Mm-hmm. We have to also take into consideration all of those little cursors and precursors along the way that lead to it. And if you really want to look at prevention, we cannot overlook those things. So when it comes to reentry, when it comes to the prison industrial complex, we must see society, the whole of society, and all of the traps and pitfalls that lead people in that direction. Reentry in general, and as you know right now, people are being released, which we're not complaining about, in record numbers. Now, why they're being released or making room, that's another whole topic. But I'm glad people are coming home. But you're big on this, talking about the pre-release plan, and I've heard you say that reentry should start the day that someone's incarcerated.
Exactly.
That's your hallmark from day one. But releasing people without a authentic plan or goal, then what happens to them? Now that's important to me, because in this country, in America, doing the chattel old world slavery of our people, and with the abolishment of that institution, you had millions of black people who were released from old world slavery and without any clear plan. And what happened was many people made a conscious decision to stay on the plantation, even if some assumed it and became the landowner, et cetera, et cetera. But because they did not have a clear plan, they did not know what was beyond the boundaries. It was safe. As much hell as it was safe. This was, at least I know how to make it.
This. That's it. It's familiar.
It's familiar. No matter, and I'm not making it, I don't believe in that dreamy singing and dancing slave stories that people tell, but it was hell, but it was my hell. It was my home. I knew that after summer came winter, winter and spring, and I knew that I could eat, I could feed my family. So it was comfortable. Now, you had some that were very exploratory and adventurous, and they dared to leave and go off and accomplish great things. And I mention that because I see the similarities with what we call New World slavery, the Jim Crow and the mass incarceration of our people. And similarly, when people are being released from prison without a clear plan or goals, like we started this program talking, many of which say, well, in words or in actions, I'd rather go back to what I know. At least in prison, they might have beat the hell out of me every now and then, but I had 3 hots and a cot. You know, I got sick. Eventually got some medical help, for the most part. You know, I think they curtailed a lot of the educational privileges, but I could learn if I didn't. I could get a GED or something. I don't know if they're doing college degrees anymore.
They're doing it in Sing Sing.
Okay.
And they're doing it at Bedford Hills. You can get up to a bachelor's degree in Bedford Hills.
Great.
You can get up to a master's degree in Sing Sing.
Wow.
And because
but there's other ways to get a master's degree.
you don't have to go to Sing Sing to get a master's degree.
Clear it up.
Because, first of all, the waiting list to get into the college classes is longer than your life.
Wow.
So you're going to be there. Like, I had a client who came to me. He had his master's, and I was going, yeah, and you were in jail for how many years? 30-something years.
Wow.
So you have a master's degree, no experience, and 30 years of incarceration, and he had to take an entry-level position in there. So there are people somewhere in that system that are recognizing that you better start educating these people that you're returning to the communities that are now saying, because I know the Bronx is saying, send us our people. Give us our people. We counted our bodies, and we know how many you have up there. You can no longer use them as your census. They're our census, and we're going to do things for our people down here. Send them back, and send them back right. So a lot of people in the Bronx have I didn't realize how many organizations have cropped up in the last 6 years.
Wow.
Just to recognize the number of people who are coming back and not letting them go back. So they have mentoring programs, and a couple of the churches are opening their doors at times when they're usually, the gate is locked and you don't see anybody in the neighborhood. It's not as many as was supposed to have happened 4 years ago. But there are some churches whose doors are open 24/7. And they're saying we can't really afford to pay anybody, so the neighborhood people are volunteering. And I was thinking that maybe if we got, you're saying the families are not ready,
Right.
really, and the people who are coming home are not ready. And I'm not saying send them to church to pray. I'm not saying it. But if that's a place where they can go that's safe, where they could even just have a conversation. Because every now and then people don't even talk sometimes. They just kind of look and stare at each other. And you want to stare at me for a long time, we can do that in church as well. Because, and I remember I've been saying for how many years that the people that are coming home are not supposed to go back to the people that they did
Right.
the crimes with. And they're with the family that they haven't really been with. And nobody ever planned for their recreation. Really, I mean, I'm trying to get the bowling in there. You know I'm gonna stick the bowling in there. Because it's something that is pleasant for everybody, even if your skill level is not the greatest. And that's something that a dad can show a child, or a mom can show. And it's something to do together and to have fun, because nobody ever talks about fun. Like, fun is a bad word. And it's not. The more people laugh, the less stressed they are. And I'm not saying laugh at each other. I'm saying just smile and feel some pleasantness in this life. Or
Right.
I'm still Pollyanna, right?
No, I mean, merriment is good for the health. It makes you healthy. I also like the fact that you mentioned the churches. I'd like to talk about churches and reentry. And I do quite a bit of work. Not Bones, but Joe does quite a bit of work with churches. And there are churches that sincerely have the heart to help this segment of the population, people that are returning from prison, help in any way they can. Some would like to offer transitional housing, that period of time, that period of adjustment I spoke about, there's a problem. Many of the churches that would like to do that, some even have the physical space, but the space is not ready. They lack the funds to, capital funding is that's the technical term, capital budget, capital funding. They don't have the money to fix up their place so that they could let people come live there. I know you mentioned to me a couple weeks ago about
the safe havens.
Right, clergy initiative, and things like that are around, if not abound. But the people that really would get into these type of programs, they need a little bit more. You know, I have the building, but it needs massive work, sometimes if not almost totally rebuilding. So I've been challenged by a couple organizations to try and find funding to fix up the space or rebuild the space, and they have in their heart, that's part of them. They want to provide, if not housing for homeless or housing for people in reentry, but they want to do it. And they have other churches, and I'm not here to churches do as they do, whatever their mission and goals are. Everything is not for everyone. But I will say that in my travels, many of the clergy that would love to do this, they're stymied, they're blockaded because they lack the funds to prepare the place. Providing funding to run a program is one thing, but if you have nothing to run it in, that's another problem. And right now, over the last, say, at least decade, capital funding grants and programs are
Almost non-existent.
Exactly. So the churches are in a catch-22.
It has to be a severe crisis because, unfortunately, the government seems to act reactive as well. Nobody, what is proactive like profanity? Because I've been hearing the problem for years now, but we're only here. We don't see any funding toward that. And I'm gonna tell you why I said that, because I'm hearing now there's wars over across the Atlantic, and they're talking about refugees coming here, and they're gonna let in, what did they say, 850,000 over the next.
Yeah.
And I'm saying again, and people think that I don't like immigrants, and that's not true, but I'm saying, I'm watching TV and I'm seeing our people sleeping on the street, laying on the ground, taking a shower, a bath in the fountain thing. And I'm not saying don't help the people over there, but I'm saying, but what about the people? Should not the people here be first and foremost in our government? And don't tell me that they failed to take advantage of the opportunities that have been afforded to them. So you should bring a refugee over here who hasn't had those opportunities because they would do it better, because somebody told me that. You don't understand. The government is not responsible for anybody. The opportunities have been put forth, and if you want to sleep on the ground, that's your choice. And I'm going, Is that me? It must be my medication or my lack of medication that makes me think that that's wrong.
I'm going to get myself into trouble. I always do when I make this statement. When it comes, I consider myself, people that look like me, I consider us as America's illegitimate children. Think about it. You open talking about happy marriages and 29, 28 years, and people are blissful. Well, just say, what if I were in one of those happy marriages and I, along the way, had a few outside children, as they call them, out of wedlock. And sometimes those kids will become at least my wife, that's painful, that's shame. So I can do some things for them, but it would probably be inappropriate to bring them to the Thanksgiving dinner table or integrate them into the whole of the family. However, as the same father with those illegitimate children, and that term doesn't reflect on them, it's just a situation. But I can go to my neighbor's house and flourish their children with gifts. and look like the nice neighborhood man or nice good old Uncle Joe. But when it comes to those illegitimate kids, it's not so much I can really do for them and keep peace in my home or et cetera, et cetera. So when it comes to the illegitimate children of America versus the immigrants or someone else's problem, there's certain things that I say. Now, it doesn't mean I'm not proud to be an American, but I'm just saying it what I see it as. I can go help your children in another country, the despondent and the dejected, and look like a national or global hero. And no one's calling me saying, well, what about the people that you're talking about now? Your children that's sleeping on park benches or taking baths in fountains. Help. Charity begins at home.
That's what I was trying to say.
But when it comes in the political arena, especially when you're dealing with world powers and superpowers, I get more credibility by going into your house and telling you what you messed up on and fixing your problems. And who's gonna call me on my problems? I'm the big bad Mr. Man. No one's gonna challenge me and say, get the blank out of my house and go clean your own house. So when it comes to, and I think it's important, even with our President Obama being in the White House, people say, well, how can you say all that stuff now, Bones? You got a black man it doesn't matter. And that's why I mentioned earlier about the abolishment of slavery and compared it to reentry today. Government has tried, but that's not the first role of government. This is why you have the non-governmental organizations, your nonprofits, because they can better serve the needs of the people because they're among the people. You mentioned about Bedford Hill and some of the lower pay grade employees. That's a better way to put it.
Okay. Should I clean that up?
Yeah, clean it up.
Okay.
Because we appreciate everyone's work is important, but people on a lower pay grade, and I say that I think they're sincere because they interact more with the people, so they see the human side of inmates. So the same thing with governments. Governments deal with the macro issues, and hence is why you have the non-governmental organizations, the nonprofits, even churches, et cetera, who can better implement programs on the local level because they are among the people. So government has tried, and in terms of housing alone, we were talking, just a little chat before the program here today, and government, when government tries to fix a problem, they normally make it worse.
Exactly. Exactly.
Let's be blunt, okay?
Exactly.
So in the major cities, like in New York City, for instance, government tried with the housing issue some decades ago, and for lack of creativity, they saw a problem with the many tenements in New York City, for instance, and their suggestion or their solution was just to knock them down. Don't try to fix it. They call it raising. Just knock the whole area down and put up new buildings. Worked for a little while, but it's not the permanent solution. Then from that, you went into the onslaught of what we call the public housing projects. Or nowadays, people just call them the projects. Good intentions by the government, well intended. It provided middle-class housing for average people. It was a much improved conditions over the tenements. I never seen a tenement, but I heard stories about them.
I lived in.
It was pretty rough, I understand.
Yes, there was sometimes when you didn't have hot water because there was no heater thing to make the water hot, and the landlord wasn't gonna purchase that because he wasn't getting enough money for rent, so you had to boil the water. I mean, it was.
That's before my time, thank God. But I heard about them. So when the housing projects were first brought onto the scene, this was like luxury, high-rise luxury apartments. It was a better quality of life, decent housing at affordable rates for people. And interesting enough, like I said, government can't fix problems. They're not designed to do that. So the housing projects, which were well intended, actually became one of the best breeding grounds for this whole prison industrial complex. And I was annoyed to learn that in its onset that this was all predicted, that you cannot have such high concentrations of challenged people. And when I'm saying challenge, it could be economically, poor education, social issues, all in one big camp, if you will, without any long-term solution. It becomes like a cesspool for infection. And now what Bones is saying, I'm not saying that nothing good comes out of projects. We know that's not true. But it becomes a challenge. Some parents, I know people personally, but their parents were strict on them, and making sure that I'm not going to lose my son or my daughter to this cesspool. So those kids, they probably hated their childhood because they had no, it was like being in prison, I would imagine. Couldn't go outside and play with, like other people did.
Couldn't play in the neighborhood. You had to go. It was like my aunts lived in the projects. One lived in Farragut, one lived in Fort Greene, and one lived in Sheepshead Bay. That was the better projects in Sheepshead Bay.
That's a nice area. Yeah, nice
better
area.
project.
Yeah.
Avenue W. Okay, that was the other land.
Yeah.
And there was a whole total atmosphere there that was not present in Fort Greene or in the Farragut, but the criteria for all three of those women getting in, these are my mother's sisters, where they were all with their husbands.
Oh.
And at the time, that was it, because it was supposed to be family-oriented living situations that were supposed to promote growth, and I'm saying supposed to. I'm saying
the projects were transitional housing.
Yes,
it wasn't meant to be a family heirloom.
Right, you weren't supposed to stay there for
Right.
generations.
Right,
it was
right.
supposed to be a step up, a leg up.
And you move on out, right?
Right, and then but people stay, and then they started not. We couldn't get in because my father wasn't in the household. And then a few years later, when we became in our teens, they changed that so that it was based more on your income and your
right.
circumstances than that. And we thought that that was good. We thought that that was good, okay, because you shouldn't penalize the kids because the parents couldn't get along.
Right.
That's how we thought. But it still was a breeding ground, because I remember the suicide bishops and the pre-Crips and Bloods.
I'm sorry.
And it was from Fort Greene.
Tell me about the suicide bishops. I'm not familiar with that. What is that?
It was a gang.
A bishop that went suicidal?
It was a gang.
Oh.
It was a gang. It was like the Crips and the Blood.
I never heard of them.
They
I
were
heard
the
of the Latin
suicide.
Kings, but not the
No,
suicide.
this in 50s.
Oh,
you got to come back to
Hilda,
the 50s.
you know I'm young.
I know, and I'm young too, but I had older cousins, but they weren't into suicide bishops because
Suicide
that
bishops.
would have been suicidal for them, because their parents would have beat the heck out of them. So they strayed away from that, and they sang on the corners like Little Anthony and the Imperials from Fort Greene.
Yeah.
They sang on the street corners, and that was considered not productive.
Right, right.
To stand on the corner and sing is not productive either, but at least they weren't robbing
There's a
anybody.
lot of doo-wops, I think, back
Yes,
then.
they're a cappella groups. All of
I've
those.
watched
were
a few movies.
Okay, so
The doo-wops.
that's what they were doing. But now the projects are danger zones. That's what we can call them, danger
Well,
zones.
you know, I was telling Hilda, no, I don't watch
the news.
the news. I try to stay away from television. Now, watch me and learn. If you young people want to be smart and brilliant people, turn the TV off, open up a book, or do some other type of research.
Except when my shoes is on.
Except when NYCHA is on. But this is educational television.
This is public access.
Public access. That's public access stations are okay, but for the most part, other stuff, turn it off. But anyway, but I saw in the news. I was visiting a nursing home yesterday, and television was on, talking about these same housing projects that we're discussing now. So what happened was I saw this thing on the news about the housing project and a young woman that was killed in one of the projects here in New York City. And subsequently, her mother and family has filed a suit against New York City Housing Authority, which is commonly referred to as NYCHA. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing when I heard that NYCHA was basically saying, according to Channel 11 or whatever news it was, when it comes to housing projects, basically you're living here at your own risk. We know it's not safe, and you know it's not safe. So enter at your own risk, visit at your own risk, and live at your own risk. That was quite appalling, I think, to most people. But being as well researched as I am, and I keep mentioning about the onset of projects, it was predicted in the 1950s, exactly what we're experiencing now, that a cesspool of nothing, if you will, that nothing good, or at least not in large numbers, could come out of it because of the conditions. It's a setup. People here on In My Shoes too, and anything I'm on, talking about by design. The housing projects were by design, and the ill effects are similarly by design. So when I heard on the news, this family they were outraged, you know, having this. NYCHA, that's a city agency, I think so.
New York City Housing Authority.
Nah, that's part of it. It's a city agency. Having the city tell you, the government tell you, you know you're in the projects. So, you know, that's what comes with being in the projects.
But that's why they have housing police.
I know, but.
Not really, huh?
Well, no. Well, there was some issues with the housing police a couple of years earlier. You know, they were homicidal, I guess, killing people or something. But I don't know. They do have, NYCHA has its own police. I've seen them. I guess they can't be everywhere. So they're telling the residents, you know, if you live in the projects, you assume these risks. The landlord is not responsible. Now, people can argue night and day whether they think it's right or wrong. I just think that there's a bigger problem here. And this is governments admitting that we know you messed up. We know that just based on numbers, and once again I said the government can't deal with people, they deal better with numbers and statistics and dollars. Just based on numbers, there's a certain percentage of you that we know won't make it. Because of in psychology it's called nature and nurture. Nature is that which you're born with, your genetic codes and et cetera, et cetera. And nurture is the environment. So the whole argument with nature and nurture is, well, I shouldn't say argument, the study is trying to find which has more impact. Is it the nature or is it the environment? And I don't know. I think it's a combination of both.
Exactly. It has to be a combination of both. You can't separate one and say it's more nature than nurture, because you could be the most brilliant and live in a hole. Yeah. So there's nothing that can. It's both. It's a combination, of everything.
So with these housing projects, that severely impacts the nurture piece of it.
Yes, it does.
Now,
it inhibits people to the point where, I mean, because I know people who never went out.
Yeah, they're afraid.
I'm afraid to go outside, and especially if you live on the high floors. I don't know why that was, though, because
I don't know either.
I guess because you can't run up there real fast. I don't know. Like people who live on the 14, 15, 16 floor,
don't come out.
They don't.
Maybe because the elevators are going to be broken at night.
Oh, you know.
The elevators go out a lot in the. I mean, I've been in many projects. When people talk about the conditions, they are not exaggerating. You know, from the overwhelming, overpowering smell of urine sometimes, bodily, whatever, on the elevators, stairwells. So it's a lot to live there.
Hey, but I kind of think that's a more recent 2000s occurrence, because
okay, I'll take your word for it.
When we were younger, that was the place to be. That was where people aspired to go, and they were clean. Yeah. And they were patrolled. I'm not only saying clean, physically clean. I'm saying you saw the police patrolling, and they actually came into the buildings, and I think that as they cut the fundings, because funding was cut, as they cut it, and this is not a priority, because remember, those people in there for the most part are not voting.
Right.
We can't hold people accountable. You cannot hold your politicians accountable if you don't have that. I flip the switch and I'm going to make sure everybody. Just imagine that all those people who are eligible in those projects, if every one of them voted,
A lot of votes.
a lot of changes could be made. But people are so disillusioned by the quote-unquote system that they don't believe that as a unit we can go as a unit and stop this.
You know, maybe in terms of the police, maybe there's some instances where the police themselves are afraid to go in some projects. It could really, maybe it's a possibility. And in terms of the cleanliness, I'll say I've seen with my own eyes that, and I keep saying everyone is not bad. It doesn't mean because you live in a project that you're hopeless or you. I've witnessed people that actually clean the hallways outside of their apartments.
Yes.
They can't clean the whole building, but they can clean their area. And so they do try. There's some hardworking, decent people inside these housing projects. And but there's more to where this is all leading. And I promise you this all ties into reentry and the whole struggle. And that is here in New York City, as many of you, if you live here, you definitely know, there has been this massive tsunami, this tidal wave of redevelopment, gentrification in New York City. And it scares me with the cost of living in this city. This is the catch-22. The cost of living, the inability to get or find employment that will offset that cost of living, and what it will do to droves and droves of people, those that are returning from prison, and even those that haven't gone to prison yet. It's going to help many people get there because it's going to force, I shouldn't say force, but it will encourage people to do things they should not do to gain monetary.
Try to meet their financial obligations any way they can.
Trying to have a place to live, yeah.
That's it. Because if you can't, and I don't know, the city talks about, oh, we're gonna work on getting affordable housing, and I think maybe when we're 90.
Affordable housing is a joke in this city. Rent regulator, rent stability. Now, I talk about it. I did a lot of research on this stuff. Matter of fact, it was a whole graduate thesis. But the rent stabilized units came about. That influx was in the 40s after World War II as a way to reward the veterans coming home from the war. Rent stabilized apartment, many of which still exist.
Rent control and rent stabilized, or just the rent control?
No, you're getting technical on it. Rent regulated. I'm gonna leave it at that. Okay. I'll leave it at that for now. But in the 1940s, as a way to reward people, then you came with the housing projects, and right now, the housing projects, many of which, like Fort Greene in Brooklyn, that's one of the larger ones, one of the earlier ones. Yeah. So the rent regulations, which provided, affordable rents for people returning from the war, and I'll just go ahead and say now that these were mostly Europeans. This was not afforded across the board to all people. And you had the housing projects of the late 40s and 50s. One of the larger ones, and one of the earlier ones, was known as Fort Greene in Brooklyn, New York. And where are you going with all of this, Bones? Where I'm going is now with this big tsunami of redevelopment, this wave of gentrification, those are some of the last untapped territories. The housing projects, and like Fort Greene, I mentioned that one, and there's Farragut houses. These are all in prime areas, downtown Brooklyn. And I know this is a worldwide program. Right now, if you're in New York City, Brooklyn is the place to be.
Up and coming.
It's funny, when I'm over in Brooklyn, and it's a certain radius. People say, you're gonna be in Brooklyn, they mean you're gonna be downtown Brooklyn.
Exactly.
Brooklyn is hot. In terms of development and real estate, there's skyscrapers going up everywhere. And I've always been fascinated by architecture, and now, but more on the residential level. Now I'm just seeing these. I get a thrill out of seeing these skyscrapers. I want one day. But anyway.
Okay, So we ran over time, as you see. So I have to say, to be continued, because I don't look at the clock, and we ran over time as usual. But we will continue with this episode next week, because I told you we don't give sound bites, we go into details. So I want to thank you again for choosing In My Shoes, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, M-Wham got a message for you. Check it out. I've been less offended by the boxers, all the sagging pants in our community. I got a song for you. Check it out. Here we go. Come on.
Pull your pants up, pull your pants up. Pull your pants up, pull your pants up. Pull your pants up, pull your pants up.
Yeah.
It's the new style.
Come on, Colette, talk to me.
Say, Mr. Harris, sagging jeans is an epidemic.
That's right.
One that I've never been a fan of. And I can't stand how these young men, they sagging, they dragging. Come on, pull your pants up. And I know us girls, we in the wrong for not putting these fellas on.
You got the power.
But I'm offended by boxers. And I think that we all should be. You feel me?
Help me.
Pull your pants up, pull your pants up. Pull your pants up, pull your pants up. Pull your pants up, pull your pants up.
Why?
It's the new style. Pull your pants up, pull your pants up.
Yeah.
Pull your pants up, pull your pants up. Pull your pants up, pull your pants up. It'll make your mama proud.
Here we go.
We living in a world affected by an epidemic. Sagging jeans and sweatpants is how I'm living. Need to set the example to make the future right. So hey, our message when we hit you with the chance.
Pull your pants up, pull your pants up. Pull your pants up,
It's kinda catchy.
pull your pants up, pull your pants up. It's the new style. Pull your pants up, pull your pants up. Pull your pants up, pull your pants up. Pull your pants up, pull your pants up. It'll make your mama proud.
I know you heard your belt say. You know your belt was talking to you this morning. Said, come on, just take me with you. I just wanna help you all day keep your pants up. I just wanna throw myself around you and hang out with you all day long. But you know what? You didn't listen, so now we don't have to tell you this. Come on, say it.
Pull your pants up, pull your pants up. Pull your pants up, pull your pants up. Pull your pants up, pull your pants up. It's the new style. Pull your pants up, pull your pants up. Pull your pants up, pull your pants up. Pull your pants up, pull your pants up. It'll make your mama proud.
In My Shoes, we really are taking a different approach to services.